makes the world go around, the world go around, the world go around. Money makes the world go around, it makes the world go round. A mark, a yen, a buck, or a pound, a buck, or a pound, a buck, or a pound is all that makes the world go around. That clinking, clanking sound that makes the world go round. Money, 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 money. If you happen to be rich and you feel like a night's entertainment, you can pay for a gay escapade. If you happen to be rich and alone and you need a companion, you can ring ting-a-ling for some mate. If you happen to be rich and you find you are left by your lover and you moan and you groan quite a lot, you can take it on the chin, call a cab and begin to recover on your 14-carat yacht. What? Money makes the world go round, the world go round, the world go round. Money makes the go round, of that we both are sure on being poor. Money, 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 money.
When you haven't any coal in your stove and you freeze in the winter and you curse to the wind and your face. When you haven't any shoes on your feet, your coat's in his paper and you look 30 pounds underweight. When you go to get a word of advice from the fat little pastor, he will tell you to love evermore. But when longer comes the rap, rat-a-tat at the window.
At the window.
Who's there?
Hunger.
Oh, hunger.
See how love flies out the door. Money makes a bird go round, the bird go round, the bird. Money makes a bird go round, the clinking, clanking sound of money, 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 money. Get a little money, 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 money. Mark a yen, a buck or a pound. That clinking, clanking, clunking sound is all that makes a bird go round. It makes a bird go round.
From the great Bob Fosse film, set in the Depression years. That's from Cabaret, the great Joel Grey and Liza Minnelli, and Money Makes the World Go Around. Actually, money earned is what makes the world go around. And on tonight's special edition of Take Two, the movie program on Public Radio KCBX, we are reflecting on what's going on in the summer of 2009, which seems to be hard times and also can be reflected in many films of the past. That's our subject tonight. Across the aisle for me to have this lively discussion, it's the man who knows more about movies than anyone I know. It's my good friend Bob Whiteford.
And across the aisle from me, the undeniable czar of film on the Central Coast, a man I'm proud to call a friend, and I know you dig him too, King Vidor Award-winning Jim Dee. And Jimmy, here we are talking about films of hard times.
You know, before we went on the air, Bob and I were discussing how do we take on this subject, because I think we were just talking about hard times, whether it's through friendship or friends that we have that have lost their jobs, or just sort of the way things are in the middle of 2009, the time of this broadcast. But and when you think about hard times in the movies, I would say there's a limitless supply. Hard times in a movie can propel a plot forward, a great plot device of somebody down on their luck and how they get through it, or what happens next, or perhaps anything that took place, any films that take place during the Great Depression after the crash of 29. But Bob and I really wanted to put more of a positive spin on this. Films are art, art reflect life, and in citing films, of course, if you experience hard times, it's not like you want to go watch one of these films and say, gee, that's where I am. I'm almost or a thought for the program tonight was seeing films that show hard times and yet have a bit of a positivity to them, and the fact, well, maybe, misery loves company is not the best way to put it. But, Bob, of all the films that we've selected for tonight's show, we didn't put in Charlie Chaplin, and I would say that his quintessential character of the tramp is a perfect example of maybe what we're going for here. The tramp who's, his jacket's too tight, his pants are baggy, his shoes don't look very good, and he probably has maybe 2 cents in his pocket. But there is a fortitude, there is a perseverance and a positivity in Charlie Chaplin's tramp character that I think is what we want to get to. In fact, a film we don't have any clips from tonight is one of his masterpieces, Modern Times, which could be a film about today, about job loss, about unemployment, about the nebulousness of a job, and getting through that. So he's kind of our model, but we've got a lot of great films to talk about on tonight's show about hard times.
Well, why don't we start off with Wild Bill Wellman's 1932 classic, Wild Boys of the Road.
Let's start with that one. This is a film that was unavailable for a long time. In fact, my good friend Bob right here actually recorded me a copy way back when, but it has since been released on DVD. And this is one of those films, I think we included it on our Pre-Code Gems show, which you can look up at kcbx.org. In fact, many of the films that we discussed on that show of the pre-code era, which is prior to 1936, could be fit in this program. In fact, we have a few that we are going to talk about. But Wild Boys of the Road, what an interesting film. It almost starts off like a Hardy Boys or a teen fun comedy, and it goes way dark. It goes to the fate of a family that seemed to be, well-to-do, and the Depression hits, and boy, you talk about the rug being pulled out from underneath the entire family. And what's interesting is the way Wild Boys of the Road begins and the way it ends. We're talking about a quantum shift of, sort of happy-go-lucky, the main characters, I think, at the senior prom, and slowly but surely he finds out, for instance, that his friend named Tom, his father died and his mom hasn't worked in months. And all of a sudden, slowly but surely, you're finding out how unemployment is ravaging the people in this film.
Well, I remember we were watching the clip. I was over at Jim's earlier, and we were watching part of this film, and I was just taken aback by just the parents suffering in silence and the son coming in to talk to his parents to help his friend.
Yes.
And the son is a good kid. They've obviously raised a good boy here. And then he picks up on the fact that they can't help his friend because they got trouble. And the tragedy of it all is because he's a decent kid, he leaves home to ease the burden on his parents. And then they get into all these, I was ready to say adventures, but it's nothing like that. This is a hard-hitting, hard-driving film that definitely could only be done in the pre-code style, because it couldn't have been made like 4 years later. And I remember we saw that it played at the film festival a few years back, and I was floored by this. This was such a great movie. It ends on a note of hope. Bad things happen, but somehow, for the most part, the protagonists survive and find a country that cares and is trying to do something to help. And that's an interesting story arc, because it goes from the love of the family to being cast aside to a government stepping up to the plate and acknowledging the troubles of its people and trying to help.
Here is a clip from the classic film 1932, Wild Boys of the Road.
Hey, you scared me. I thought everybody was in bed. What are you doing up so late, Dad?
Just checking over a few things.
Say, Ma, you should have saw Grace tonight.
Seen Grace.
You been crying?
Well, no. What would I be crying about? Say good night to Father and go to bed.
Good night, Edward.
Good night. Say, Dad, could you do something for Tommy?
Tommy who?
Tommy Gordon. His dad's dead, and... Well, his mother hasn't worked in a long time, and I thought maybe...
Just a minute, Edward. I may as well tell you now as later. You were right. Your mother has been crying.
Why? What's the matter?
Tonight, I finished up at the cement company. I've been laid off indefinitely.
Oh, gee, Dad. No fooling.
You're old enough to realize the seriousness of it. It's not easy for a man of my age to step right into another position. So for a while, we'll all have to economize till I find something.
Oh, I will. I'll cut down on everything. Gee, it's too bad Mom had to order me that new suit yesterday.
No, I'm sorry, dear. I'm afraid we'll have to cancel that tomorrow.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I can stand the suit.
No, sir. Nothing doing. I didn't like it, did I, Ma? Remember? I said I didn't want a gray one, because it looked too much like my brown one. Remember?
Yes, I remember you didn't like it. Tom, get to bed. It's getting late.
Good night, Dad.
Good night, son.
It's a scene from Wild Boys of the Road, just a great film, a pre-code film. And you know, Bob, it was interesting what you were saying, that when the code came in 1936, it changed things a lot, and the grittiness of this particular film and many films that were done around the same period, or late 20s, early 30s, didn't hold back. And you're saying after the code came in, they couldn't have made this. I find it very interesting that the situations that are shown in these films parallel today perfectly. However, do you think they would remake these films today when there's no Hays Code to worry about? Because I guess I wonder if unemployment or facing joblessness or when the money isn't coming in would be, worthy of, well, to me it would be worthy, but, the producer, the guy from The Player, Tim Robbins, would he okay, or would he greenlight a film, a guy coming in, hey, here's a guy during the Depression, he lost his job, I don't think they would okay.
Nobody would pay to see that, Jimmy. Give Michael Bay $100 million and a bunch of the latest computer technological jazz, and let him make something that's an abomination, but people will drool and look at.
Diversions are valid. I think when things are tough, you want to go to the movie theater perhaps and not see your life up there on the screen and make you feel badly.
Well, that's why
about
Busby Berkeley was so big back then. He did his diversion. So did Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Those were all about diversionary films. I wouldn't put them in the same class as Michael Bay. In fact, I wouldn't put Hitler in the same class as Michael Bay.
But it is very interesting, the fact that we do have these films from this time period that did reflect the times. And as we get into, the rather nebulous times as we are in 2009, we're not really sure how the unemployment is going to go, apparently going up, at least at this point. And there are a lot of people down on their luck, as they were back in the 30s and the Great Depression. And you would just wonder if there were films that would reflect that. And I guess the answer would be no. Again, would people go out to the movie theaters and see these? Now, I would highly suggest checking out some of these movies we're talking about on the show tonight, and the fact that they're great films. They are a great reflection of what was going on then and now. And I do think that they provide some hope, even when, again, Wild Boys of the Road has some of the most tough things on it. I mean, these kids end up riding the rails, and what goes on there is brutal. And you just wonder if that would fly today. And, before we forget and we move on to our next film, The Great Babyface, I do want to mention a film that we've talked about on previous programs, and it's a film called Heroes for Sale. I wish we had a clip from it. We do not. But if you want to jot down a title of a film that is almost so timely and, shall we say, timeless, in the fact that here is the main character coming out of the war. He's actually a war hero, but he's not recognized as a war hero. He gets wounded. He gets addicted to narcotics in his hospital stay. But then he comes home, and jobs are hard to find. When he does find a job, he does it great. And then the job turns on him, and the fact that it gets industrialization. He's no longer needed and sort of pushed out the door. And then we get into the entire idea of unions and so forth. This movie, Heroes for Sale, you should seek it out. But, Bob, I would say you know this movie well. In fact, you're the one who showed me this movie originally.
This is a classic.
Classic, and it's so perfect how it is so timely.
Absolutely. I think it was made in 1932. Richard Barthelmess was the star. And, yeah, it touches upon a theme that would be hit upon many times during the 30s, which is the doughboy coming home, yesterday's hero, no jobs, no opportunities, and basically they have to fend for themselves, and in the process of doing so, their life becomes a spiral that goes down. And this is a tough, hard-hitting film, and it's a very interesting, very mature, very almost un-Hollywood, unsparing kind of movie. To look at it, Jimmy, we think this was a film that would have been made in the 70s during the... it reminds me a bit of like Friends of Eddie Coyle or one of the great crime films of the 70s. Hard-hitting, with a message, and it's so well done, and it's not formulaic. Heroes for Sale, folks, definitely, if you're digging on a hard time film, that's one to have if you can find it.
Well, we are going to remain in the pre-code era with one of the great ones from that time. It's called Babyface, with the great Barbara Stanwyck. We talk about a very young Barbara Stanwyck, and also one of the products of unemployment, of hard times. We find people, well, having to change their professions, as Babyface certainly does, and getting to the top however she can do it. But what's great about this film is, again, faced with that hopelessness, the despair of hard times and of unemployment, we have Barbara Stanwyck, who is going to, well, this film has a little bit of an elliptical feel to it, but still, she's willing to go, go the whole enchilada here to, as she... she sleeps her well to the top. I just said it.
With the great scene of the skyscraper, and it's just, floor, then they move up another floor and another floor, and you get the sense of her advance.
Yes, the poverty.
Brilliant.
The poverty that she's in, but as she works her way up the ladder, we see her go up to the next floor of the skyscraper.
And one of the guys she ditches is a young John Wayne.
Yes. Well, let's hear this clip. This is Barbara Stanwyck from Babyface.
Well, that's that.
I never go to funerals or relic of barbarism. So, now what?
Well, the future looks very bright. Just as I was leaving the cemetery, Ed Sipple made me a proposition. And last night, the manager of the Star and Garter Burlesque House offered me a job in the chorus to do a strip act.
A strip act?
Yeah, show my shape.
Well, that's a business in itself.
Oh, I guess I ain't much of a businesswoman.
What's going to become of you? It's up to you to decide. If you stay in this town, you are lost.
Where would I go? Paris? I got $4.
That's what makes me mad with you. You're a coward. I mean it. You let life defeat you. You don't fight back.
What chance has a woman got?
More chance than man. A woman, young, beautiful like you are, could get anything she wants in the world. But there is a right and a wrong way. Remember, the price of the wrong way is too great. Go to some big city where you will find opportunities. Don't let people mislead you. You must be a master, not a slave. Be clean, be strong, defiant, and you will be a success.
Well, maybe you'll be a success. And of course, Bob, as we get into the reality of hard times as seen in some of these movies, that was from Babyface. It's crime enters into the picture. And we also get into Babyface and the sort of the moral ambiguity, not so much ambiguity, but morality sometimes goes out the window when you're trying to pay the bills and
Exactly.
you've got $4 in your pocket.
And what's interesting about this film, Jimmy, very much like Wild Boys of the Road, the kind of movie that could not have been made 3-4 years down the road. In fact, Barbara Stanwyck was a staple of Depression-era cinema. But the films she made after this, even as the hard-boiled dame, were very different from this one. Babyface, so over the top, I've always get a big vicarious thrill watching this baby.
And again, timely and timeless. I mean, that moral ambiguity today, facing the unemployment, the hard times, I mean, I wouldn't even pose the question, but let's just say that Babyface is timeless and timely in the same way that Barbara Stanwyck would do what she does in the movie to get to the top.
Precisely, Jimmy.
Let's move on to our next film, which is also from the pre-code area, and we're talking about another classic, I Was a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. And again, we talk about hard times producing hard people, and crime seems to be a natural outgrowth of hard times. And in this film, boy, I mean, this is another tough, hard-hitting film. And there's that idea of trains that come up in this film. Now, I haven't seen this in a long time. I'm just thinking, did he ever get onto a train in this film? But in Wild Boys of the Road, we see the kids riding the rails. Later on, we'll be talking about like a film, Emperor of the North, where we talk about actual hobo culture that is on these trains. And I know if there's another one on here where we're talking about getting on a train, but it's these days with hard times, the train system in America isn't all that good. So I don't think we're going to see people riding.
No one's riding the rails anymore.
No. But Bob, let's talk about I Was a Fugitive from a Chain Gang.
Jimmy, this is kind of an interesting film because you had this is your Warner Brothers like crime troika. You start off with Jimmy Cagney in Public Enemy. You got Edward G. Robinson in Little Caesar. And then suddenly you've got I Was a Fugitive from a Chain Gang with Paul Muni, who'd also go on to star in the original Scarface, which came out the same year, which featured Paul Muni, George Raft, the gangster actor that the gangsters wanted to look like, and of course our favorite, Boris Karloff. But this film it's kind of has a message to it. Paul Muni is a doughboy coming home after the war. He has a dream. It's not like he doesn't have a job. He has a boring job waiting for him, but he's been out in the world. He doesn't want to be regimented anymore. He wants to explore other opportunities. He wants to be an engineer and build bridges because he likes working outside. That's what he did in the Army, and that's what he wants to do. Unfortunately, he follows his dream and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Not unlike William H. Macy and David Mamet's Edmund, where just one night out and, boy, everything goes crazy. But in a sense, it's a similar film in the sense that he walks away from the convention, which actually is his right, considering what he's been through. He's not looking for a life in crime. All he's looking for is to find meaning to his life. And it's got to be more than just a factory whistle. And of course it just leads down. And when he's arrested in a southern town, vagrant, staring at a hamburger, and ends up on a chain gang, fighting for his life against other criminals and the man. I mean, this is a criminal we have total empathy with, because he could be us.
Yes. Let's listen to a clip here. This is from I Was a Fugitive from a Chain Gang.
Are you up here for murder, kid? Huh?
No.
I heard that the guy that killed 4 people was being sent up here.
Nardine's always worrying about losing his spot here as high man. He only killed 3.
Yeah, more than anyone else in this here chain gang.
His wife, his sister-in-law, and his mother-in-law. Killed him in one night with an axe so as not to disturb the neighbors.
What are you taking the rap for, kid, huh?
For looking at a hamburger. Ah, come on, tell us. You're among friends.
Looking at a hamburger is what got him into this thing. And you know, Bob, was really interesting what you said. In this film, I Was a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, you realize that Paul Muni does not want to do the factory work. He doesn't want to do, he wants to do something, you know, with more dignity, more intelligence, like you said, building bridges, I guess. And it's interesting going back once again to just mention Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. That film is all about landing a job, you know, work, maybe getting a family, and how hard that may be. However, Chaplin goes a little bit further in the fact that, you know, at the beginning of the film, he is a factory worker. And that's not pleasant at all. I mean, he's really much like a slave. And, you know, twisting those bolts on that conveyor belt that he keeps doing, you know, turns him into a wreck. So it's really interesting what Chaplin does in that film, Modern Times, and the fact that, well, the title itself, Modern Times, I think is, you know, title for the ages. But even when they have the job, Chaplin, you know, I think questions the idea of industrialized jobs, that factory work that is, you know, makes you less than human, so to speak.
Well, you know, that kind of reminds me of Albert Finney in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. Here it is, he has a job in a factory, and you just watch him working his lathe, and he's seething with rage. He can't stomach it. All he wants to do is get out of there. And in a way, it almost seems more like a prison than a job. And Chaplin kind of touches upon that feeling as well, in a kind of a humorous way. Well, not kind of, an extremely humorous way.
We're talking about hard times, movies about hard times, trying to put a positive spin on the idea that, yeah, we are here in the year 2009. Things are changing. There's sort of a quantum shift going on with whatever we're heading towards, which at this point seems a little nebulous. But lots of great movies to tell us that we've been here before, and we'll continue the discussion on Take Two in a moment. This is Public Radio, KCBX and KCBX HD1 San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara, and we are streaming worldwide at kcbx.org. Back in a moment.
You're listening to Take Two on Public Radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara. Streaming at kcbx.org. And you can write to us at movies@kcbx.org.
Support for KCBX comes from Mission Community Bank, where you can write yourself a business loan whenever you need it with Signature Credit. Immediate access with a check ready to use for your business. More at missioncommunitybank.com.
Funds for KCBX are also provided by Idler's Appliance. Oil prices may be up and down, but the Central Coast can rely on Idler's for consistent values and service. Locations in San Luis Obispo, Atascadero, and Paso Robles.
Good evening, everyone. We're back on Take Two, the movie program on Public Radio KCBX. My name is Jim Dee. I'm here with my good friend Bob Whiteford. We looked around us and we realized that at least in the middle of 2009, the world and America experiencing hard times, and where it's going to lead, we're not really sure. But we're finding also reflections in films across the years, over the years, that perhaps we have been here before, and we're trying to put a positive spin by noting some films that really put forth that idea that we've been here before. And of the many, many films we could have chosen, we do have a handful we'd like to share. We probably could come up with dozens more that reflect our subject tonight. But we're going to stay in the 1930s, and here's a very interesting film, a film that I personally love, and I'm glad you brought this up to mention on tonight's program. Angels with Dirty Faces. Is this the first appearance of the Dead End Kids?
Actually, the Dead End Kids appeared, this came out in 1939. I think they made their first appearance in 1937 in a film called Dead End with Humphrey Bogart and Joel McCrea. It was a Sam Goldwyn actually brought us Leo Gorcey and Hunts Hall. This is, this is kind of part of the big Warner Brothers gangster movies. But what's interesting about this film is, okay, you've got Jimmy Cagney at his gangster best as Rocky Sullivan. You've got Humphrey Bogart as, back before he was the big star. This is 2 years before High Sierra. So his job now is to be the second banana gangster that gets killed by Cagney, a role he's reprised from the Roaring Twenties, which is also probably the pinnacle of the Warner Brothers gangster films. You have Ann Sheridan, the oomph girl, supplying the sex appeal. And you have Pat O'Brien laying on the Irish Blarney heavily as the priest, Father Jerry. And this is a part he would play many times down the years. In fact, him and Cagney would reunite in the World War I classic Fighting 69th, which would come out a year later. But what's interesting about this film, Jimmy, is whereas in I Was a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, the priest in that film is kind of just he's a dolt. He's kind of a moron. Pat O'Brien's priest is engaged. He cares. He's from the streets. He knows the score. And he's just trying to keep as many kids out of the gas chamber as he can. And he knows he's fighting an uphill battle. And you throw a really charismatic gangster. And let's face it, Jimmy, Cagney's electric.
He is.
He is so much fun to watch. His verbalization is spot on. He's the master of white noise. He's always moving around because he was a great song and dance man. And when he plays the gangster, the gun's close, his fists are closer, he's always in a tuxedo, ready for action. And then you throw in the Dead End Kids with Billy Hallup. He was the boss back then. Leo Gorcey was number 2. Hunts Hall, Bobby Jordan, Bernard Punsley. They're all there, and it's so much fun to watch. This film, it just seems to take off from the first frame to the last. It's all action and really crackling dialogue. It's directed by Michael Curtiz, one of the great filmmakers of that era. He did Casablanca out there, folks, if you don't know him. This
He did
film,
Yankee Doodle Dandy as well.
that's right. This one it has a lot of good things going for it. And yeah, things are tough, they're hard, and it makes people hard, but it also shows that they have a heart, too, except for Bogart. He's there probably to show what a callous guy looks like. Because Cagney's character, Jimmy, he's charismatic, but he's a crook. He's a gangster. But he's also got kind of a heart of gold. He likes to throw his money around, and he thinks he's helping the kids, getting them in a nice suit and giving them some of that easy money. But Pat O'Brien, who, interestingly enough, grew up with Cagney. I mean, here I am giving away the plot, but come on.
Doesn't
know.
matter. See the movie.
Yeah. It's like Pat O'Brien is a kid. They were robbing someplace. He got away. He got to be a priest. Cagney got caught. He became the gangster. And this film has one of the most interesting endings I've ever seen.
Very interesting ending. I won't go into it, but we should talk about this after the show. But Bob, I think what's important in Angels with Dirty Faces is the idea that not only do you need jobs to pull yourself out of the poverty, the kids, the dead end kids themselves, I mean, they're a great example of the subject of the show tonight. They're not coming from well-to-do families. They're not coming from the family that the protagonist in Wild Boys of the Road came from. I mean, these guys are on the streets. I don't know their financial situation, but I would assume it's not good at all. And what this film puts forth, other than, for instance, Wild Boys of the Road, where the government seems to step in and kind of recognize that there's a problem here, I think what the kids need, and probably what we all need, is some sort of inspiration. I mean, yeah, hey, I'm out of a job, or my job, I got laid off, or whatever it may be. Where is the hope? Even if it's kind of false hope,
Right.
You've got to have something out there that is inspiring, that keeps you going, that makes you, as we mentioned with Babyface, not go the wrong way to fulfill what you need to do to get by. So Angels with Dirty Faces does present that hope, even though it's coming from a very interesting place. This, from the gangster of Jimmy Cagney, and again with this ending that folks out there, if they know the film, they know the ending. But boy, it's very interesting. But again, beyond the job, beyond the promise of a job, you need something to lift you up a little bit, and I think this film does it in a very unique way.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jimmy.
Here's a great clip. This is Pat O'Brien and Jimmy Cagney in Angels with Dirty Faces.
As long as there's the slightest hope from the governor.
It'd be a whole lot easier to handle me out of the way, won't they?
That's up to you, Rocky.
Huh?
We haven't got a lot of time. I want to ask you one last favor.
There's not much left that I can do, kid.
Yes, there is, Rocky. Perhaps more than you could do under any other circumstances. If you have the courage for it, and I know you have.
Me walking in there? That's not going to take much.
I know that, Rocky.
Am I sitting in a barber chair? They're going to ask me, got anything to say? And I say, sure. Give me a haircut, a shave, and a massage. One of those nice new electric massages.
But you're not afraid, Rocky?
No, they'd like me to be, wouldn't they? But I'm afraid I can't oblige them, kid. You know, Jerry, I think in order to be afraid, you got to have a heart. I don't think I got one. I had that cut out of me a long time ago.
Suppose I asked you to have the heart.
Hmm?
To be scared.
What do you mean?
Suppose at the last minute the guards dragged you out here screaming for mercy. Suppose you went to the chair yellow.
Yellow? Say, what's the matter with you, Jerry? You've been worrying about my courage.
I know that. This is a different kind of courage, Rocky. The kind that's born in heaven. Well, not the courage of heroics or bravado. The kind that you and I and God know about.
Still don't know what you mean.
Look, Rocky, just before I came up here, the boys saw me off on a train, Soapy and several of the others. Well, you can well imagine what they told me. Said, Father, tell Rocky to show the world what he's made of, and tell him not to be afraid, and to go out laughing. And
What do you want? I'm not going to let them down. That's what's worrying you.
that's what I want you to do. I want you to let them down. You see, you've been a hero to these kids and hundreds of others all through your life. And now you're going to be a glorified hero in death, and I want to prevent that, Rocky. They've got to despise your memory. They've got to be ashamed of you.
You asked me to pull an act, join Yella, so those kids will think I'm no good. You asked me to throw away the only thing I got left, the only thing I've been able to take away from me. You want me to give those newspaper sophisters a chance to say another act, join Yella.
But, Rocky, you and I all know that you're not.
You're asking a nice little favor, Jerry. Ask me to crawl on my belly, last thing I do in life.
I know what I'm asking. And the reason I'm asking is because being kids together sort of gave me the idea that you might like to join hands with me and save some of those other boys from ending up here.
Not done doing. You're asking too much. You want to help those kids? You got to figure out some other way.
But it's impossible to do it without your help, Rocky. I can't reach all of those boys. Thousands of hero-worshipping kids all over the country.
Oh, don't give me that humanity stuff again, will you? I had enough of that in the courtroom. Told everything I knew. Name names. Get the low down, the whole dirty mess. Now, what more do you want?
What I've always wanted, Rocky. Straighten yourself out with God.
Great scene from Angels with Dirty Faces. And, you know, as that clip was playing, Bob and I were talking about the end of the film, which we won't reveal. If you know the film, that's fine. But there is that little bit of possibility of ambiguity here. In other words, well, what happens could go one way or it could go another way. It's what makes it such a great film, Angels with Dirty Faces.
I agree. I mean, 70 years later, we're still wondering.
Yes. We're talking about hard times in the movies, reflecting the times of right now, and probably one of the quintessential great films that display hard times that were experienced in this country is the film version of John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, directed by the great John Ford. And we have Henry Fonda in a great role. And this film, its grittiness, I was watching some of this today, Bob, and the grittiness of this film, I think, it's fabulous. I mean, it doesn't pull any punches at the hardship of these people coming to California, what it takes to survive, and just the plight of the folks where there were no jobs, and where do you go, what do you do?
And when you go somewhere, you're exploited and treated brutally. And how do you maintain your dignity through all that? This is such a great film. I'd say this is a film for the ages. This is something that you know what? Watch this movie during good times. It'll keep your feet grounded. It's that good.
Let's listen to this clip from The Grapes of Wrath. This is a scene where a lot of people have congregated to just sort of hang together and share and hopefully survive on that trek towards California. And then the possibility of a job comes up, and this is what happens. This is from The Grapes of Wrath.
You men want to work?
Sure we want to work. Where's it at?
Tavares County. Fruit's opening up. Need a lot of fruit pickers.
You doing the hiring?
Well, I'm contracting the land.
What you paying?
Well, can't tell exactly yet. About 30 cents, I guess.
Why can't you tell? You took the contract, didn't you?
That's true, but it's key to the price. Might be a little more, might be a little less.
All right, mister, I'll go. You just show us your license to contract. Then you make out an order. Where and when and how much you're going to pay. And you sign it and we'll go.
Now listen, smart guy. I'll run my business my own way. I got work. If you want to take it, okay. If not, just sit here, that's all.
Twice now I fell for that line. Maybe he needs 1,000 men. So he gets 5,000 there and he'll pay 15 cents an hour. And you guys will have to take it because you'll be hungry. If he wants to hire men, let him write it out and say what he's going to pay. Ask to see his license. He ain't allowed by law to contract men without a license.
Hey, Joe. Agitator. Ever see this guy before?
Seems like I have. Seems like I seen him hanging around a used car lot that was busted into. Yep, that's the fella. Get in this car.
Got nothing on him.
Open your trap again and you'll go too.
Now, you fellas don't want to listen to troublemakers. You better all pack up and come on up to Tavares County.
It's a scene from The Grapes of Wrath, and amazing. You know, Bob, as we're going through the films that we've cited tonight, we did talk about in Hard Times where the crime element comes up, but also, which seems to be much more of a contemporary idea, is corporate crime. But that was happening way back when as well. I mean, here are these folks coming out from Arkansas, or wherever, from the middle of America, and they seem like they're getting legitimate jobs, but they are being taken advantage of by the company man.
Right.
We talked about the film Heroes for Sale. The same thing happened there, where a guy doing a great job and really doing a fantastic job is taken advantage of by the company and eventually replaced. I'm just trying to think of some other Wild Boys of the Road with the kids on the railways, and again, they are treated very poorly by those who they think they might be able to get some work. Right. So that idea of sort of corporate crime is mixed in with the Jimmy Cagney character, and later on we're going to be talking about Mr. John Dillinger, who was happening at the time. But it's interesting how, shall we say, people were taken advantage of either by the criminal element or the criminal element in the corporate structure.
Well, you know, I think in a lot of these films, a lot of the characters turn to the corporate structure for a job to, you know, legitimately make their lives better through a job. And they find they're exploited, lied to, stepped on, and they kind of turn to crime as a way to fight back against them. And then because these are, you know, corporate businesses, ergo they're the law, quote unquote, these people become law breakers. I mean, Henry Fonda's character in The Grapes of Wrath just goes after someone who's a killer and, you know, and returns the favor. And now, but that guy was, you know, working, quote unquote, within the law, allegedly. We know he was a stinker, but Fonda's the outlaw for fighting back against him. And that thread is in a lot of these films as well. And these are filmmakers from, you know, all kinds of political persuasions. I mean, John Ford was no fire-breathing communist by any stretch of the imagination, nor was Wild Bill Wellman. But they saw that when hard times came, people were getting exploited when they needed help.
Yes, and you know, one more. I mean, we mentioned Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. There's a scene in that where he picks up a red flag in the back of a truck that has lumber or something. He picks up the flag, and he's like, "Hey, you know, you dropped your flag," and then a group of workers are coming behind him striking, and he ends up being like, you know, the leader, or the leader. And as we heard this worker in Grapes of Wrath being called an agitator, here's the unwitting Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times, who becomes an agitator just by happening to be in the same place as a Union March, it looks like. Yeah, all those elements seem to be mixing together in a lot of these films, and I would tend to think today, too, with those who are having a hard time. They may do something that is morally incorrect or morally wrong, or the effect of that so-called corporate structure that would just as soon have you out the door and will have you out the door in 10 minutes, you know,
yep.
Expendable. Well, we do want to talk about at least a couple more films we do have clips for, but we did want to mention some films we do not have clips for. The first film, I believe it's Walter Hill's first film, Hard Times, with our guy Charles Bronson, and, you know, there's the title, Hard Times, and a great movie it is.
You know, Jimmy, it's interesting. I think in the 70s, we saw a lot of great movies about the Depression. Hard Times with Bronson and James Coburn comes to mind right away. Walter Hill's first film. You know, again, just a guy, and he's up against it. He has one skill. He can fight. And it ends up, you know, he becomes a bare-knuckled fighter. When Bronson fights that muscle-bound guy that's with the shaved head, That's a classic. What a great movie this is. But it's kind of just the tip of the iceberg, because then you got Robert Aldrich's Emperor of the North, which is one of the best movies I've ever seen, and it's got Lee Marvin as the top hobo, and it's got Ernest Borgnine as the toughest railroad, I don't know what you'd call him, like a railroad cop, and his job is to throw hobos off of freight trains. This is an epic confrontation, because we were talking about this earlier, folks. Marvin's a hobo. He doesn't have anything but his name. And Borgnine, even though he works for the railroad, he quote-unquote has a job, they're poor too. He has a few bucks, but he has his reputation. Nobody's really got anything but their pride. And Borgnine says, no one rides on my train, and if you do, I'm going to beat you to death. And Lee Marvin is, oh yeah? I'm the king of the hobos. I'm going to ride on your train. And they have an epic fight in this film. In fact, this film was done by the same people who gave us The Dirty Dozen, which is director Robert Aldrich, a very underrated filmmaker. Kenneth Hyman, the producer. I mean, it's got all kinds of people. Vic Taybeck, and of course, Keith Carradine. He's trying to learn the ropes from Lee Marvin. This is one of the great films of the Depression. Fantastic film.
And Bob, it's where was I going to go with this? The idea of we do have Dillinger to talk about, but it's just that the circumstances that arise from from the hard times. I mean, it's just they seem to be universal as we look at all of these films we're citing tonight, and there are just all these interconnections of the way things go, and just who knows where things are going to go. Presently, I just hope they don't get as they are in some of these films we're citing. Let's. Do we want to talk about? Okay. Let's. It's great that Bob brought up the film Dillinger. We do have a new film in theaters in 2009 with Johnny Depp as John Dillinger called Public Enemies. But our man Warren Oates portrayed him in this film from about in the 1970s.
Yeah, I think around 73.
And again, we're talking about the Depression era, and we're talking about the rise of crime during that time. But Warren Oates makes a great Dillinger.
He certainly does, and Ben Johnson makes a great Melvin G. Purvis, the G-Man. And I gotta say, this is an early effort from John Milius, who, whatever you think of, I think he's a wonderful storyteller, and he's been responsible for a lot of great movies. And he does a great job with this. I mean, it's got Harry Dean Stanton. It's got all kinds of people in it. This film, and believe me, I'm a big fan of the 44 version with Lawrence Tierney as Dillinger, because Tierney's one of my favorite tough guys of all time. But Warren Oates, there's something about his face, his persona. He's so right in this role. And Jimmy, to look at Warren Oates' face is to see hard times staring back at you.
Yes, that's good.
And yet there's kind of this crazy humor he has as well, where he's going to try and defy the odds no matter how long they are. And I think he really captures kind of the folk hero elements to John Dillinger. Very interesting film. Ben Johnson is outstanding in this as the G-Man, Melvin Purvis, who's, even though he's quote-unquote the good guy, he's an awfully cold, brutal guy. He's out to kill. And you're almost rooting for Dillinger. So Milius he's chosen sides in this picture. And yet it's a wonderful movie. I think it's a real slice of Americana as it was back in 1934.
And that's the Depression era when John Dillinger was happening. Here is our favorite Warren Oates in the film Dillinger.
5 and 6.
Don't hurry like that. I don't want any mistakes made with my money. If you make mistakes with my money, I'll take my business elsewhere. Wouldn't like that, would you, dearie?
No, ma'am.
What, are you smiling at me for like that, young man? I don't believe I know you.
No, ma'am, but whenever I see money, I smile that way. You got a nice smile, too, miss. I'd like to withdraw my entire account.
Your entire account?
Yes, ma'am, the whole thing.
And your name?
John Dillinger.
All right, everybody, hold it right where you are. This is a robbery. Charlie, get that back vault. Harry, clean up the counters.
Watch them, Homer. Watch them.
No. Everybody on your stomachs now. I said I mean it now. You miss. Turn over. This ain't no board directors meeting.
Get in there. Don't nobody get nervous. You ain't got nothing to fear. You're being robbed by the John Dillinger gang. That's the best there is. These few dollars you lose here today, they're gonna buy you stories to tell your children, your great-grandchildren. This could be one of the big moments in your life. Don't make it your last.
Warren Oates is John Dillinger, operating during the Depression years, and wrapping up pretty much our overview of just a handful of films reflecting hard times both then and perhaps mirroring what we're experiencing now. And, you know, as Bob and I put this show together, we went through a lot of films, and there are so many more. We mentioned Peter Bogdanovich's Paper Moon, maybe even The Last Picture Show, where, you know, a little town is changing due to economic hardships. But, folks, I'm sure you could come up with many more that reflect the times we're living in now. And again, I think the best way to put it is, and maybe a guard or just a guard against what's happening, is we have been here before. We can look at these wonderful films and experience in some sort of a way through art of things that have been experienced by people in the past, and bracing ourselves for what's happening right now.
Well, I kind of hearken back to what you said earlier, Jimmy. When I was thinking about this show, I mean, things are rough, and I guess I'm looking for some inspiration to get through the current tough period. And I'm looking back at Cagney and Warren Oates and Lee Marvin to provide me with some inspiration to go out and face another tough day. And we've done it tonight.
Thank you very much for listening. Thanks to Hank, our master projectionist, and we certainly hope you are not experiencing hard times. If you are, well, check out a good movie, spend a little time with family and friends, and perhaps you'll be inspired. We'll see you next week on Take Two.